preservation of and increased access to the 92nd Street Y Humanities Audio Archives is generously funded by the National Endowment for the Humanities.
Choshev Versammelte. Mein Name ist Amos Hirschbein und ich habe die große Schie, heintobend, euch vorzustellen, den bekovedigen jiddischen Schriftsteller Isaac Bashevis Singer. Ich glaube, als es ist passig, zu begrüßen ihm und euch mit einem jiddischen Wort. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Amos Hirschbein, and it's with the greatest pleasure that I come before you to introduce to you a great Yiddish writer. I've taken the liberty of addressing both you and him in Yiddish, as it is Yiddish and its culture that we are honoring here tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, Isaac Bashevis Singer.
Zu viel Licht, ein bisschen weniger Licht. Ladies and gentlemen, Rabbi Darby, Mr. Hirschbein, Amos Hirschbein, whom I know since I was 5 years old. Most probably I would know the rabbi when he was 4 years old, who knows. I asked the rabbi, shall I read to you something sad or gay? And the rabbi said, begin with something gay. So I hope it will be gay. By gay, I mean merry. That's all. The story is called The Day I Got Lost. An autobiography of Professor Schlemiel. It is easy to recognize me. See a man in the street wearing a too long coat, too large shoes, a crumpled hat with a wide brim, spectacles with one lens missing, and carrying an umbrella though the sun is shining, and that man will be me, Professor Schlemiel. There are other unmistakable clues to my identity. My pockets are always bulging with newspapers, magazines, and just papers. I carry an overstuffed briefcase, and I'm forever making mistakes. I've been living in New York City for over 40 years. Yet, whenever I want to go uptown, I find myself walking downtown. And when I want to get east, I go west. I'm always late, and I never recognize anybody. I'm always misplacing things. 100 times a day, I ask myself, where is my pen? Where's my money? Where's my handkerchief? Where's my address book? I am what is known as an absent-minded professor. For many years, I have been teaching philosophy in the same university, and I still have difficulty in locating my classroom. Elevators play strange tricks on me. I want to go to the top floor, and I land in the basement. Hardly a day passes when an elevator door doesn't close on me. Elevator doors are my worst enemies. In addition to my constant blundering and losing things, I'm forgetful. I enter a coffee shop, hang up my coat, and leave without it. By the time I remember to go back for it, I've forgotten where I have been. I lose hats, books, umbrellas, rubbers, and above all, manuscripts. Sometimes I even forget my own address. One evening, I took a taxi because I was in a hurry to get home. The taxi driver said, "Where to?" And I could not remember where I lived. "Home," I said. "Where is home?" he asked in astonishment. "I don't remember," I replied. "What is your name?" "Professor Schlemiel." "Professor," the driver said, "I will get you to a telephone booth. Look in the telephone book and you will find your address." He drove me to the nearest drugstore with a telephone booth in it, but he refused to wait. I was about to enter the store when I realized I had left my briefcase behind. I ran after the taxi shouting, "My briefcase, my briefcase," but the taxi was already out of earshot. In the drugstore, I found a telephone book, but when I looked under S, I saw to my horror that though there were a number of Schlemiels listed, I was not among them. At that moment, I recalled that several months before, Mrs. Schlemiel, my wife, had decided that we should have an unlisted telephone number. The reason was that my students thought nothing of calling me in the middle of the night and waking me up. It also happened quite frequently that someone wanted to call some other Schlemiel and got me by mistake. That was all very well, but how was I going to get home? I usually had some letters addressed to me in my brief packet. Sometimes I find there letters which stay there 2 years. But just that day, I had decided to clean out my packets. It was my birthday, and my wife had invited friends in for the evening. She had baked a huge cake and decorated it with birthday candles. I could see my friends sitting in our living room waiting to wish me a happy birthday. And here I stood in some drugstore, for the life of me not able to remember where I lived. When I recalled the telephone number of a friend of mine, Dr. Motorhead, and I decided to call him for help. I dialed, and a young girl's voice answered. "Is Dr. Motorhead at home?" "No," she replied. "Is his wife at home?" They are both out," the girl said. "Perhaps you can tell me where they can be reached," I said. "I'm only the babysitter, but I think they went to a party at Professor Schlemiel's." "Would you like to leave a message?" she said. "Who shall I say called, please?" "Professor Schlemiel," I said. They left for you a house about an hour ago," the girl said. "Can you tell me where they went?" I asked. "I just told you," she said. "They went to your house." "But where do I live?" "You must be kidding," the girl said, and hung up. I tried to call a number of friends, those whose telephone numbers I happened to think of, but wherever I called, I got the same reply. "They've gone to a party at Professor Schlemiel." As I stood in the street wondering what to do, it began to rain. Where's my umbrella? I said to myself. And I knew the answer at once. I had left it somewhere. I got under a nearby canopy. It was now raining cats and dogs. It was lightning and it thundered. All day it had been sunny and warm. But now that I was lost and my umbrella was lost, it had to storm. And it looked as if it would go on for the rest of the night. To distract myself, I began to ponder the ancient philosophical problem. A mother chicken lays an egg, I thought to myself, and when it hatches, there is a chicken. That's how it has always been. Every chicken comes from an egg, and every egg comes from a chicken. But was there a chicken first, or an egg first? No philosopher has ever been able to solve this eternal question. Just the same, there must have been an answer. Perhaps I, Shlemiel, am destined to stumble on it. It continued to pour buckets. My feet were getting wet, and I was chilled. I began to sneeze, and I wanted to wipe my nose, but my handkerchief too was gone. At that moment, I saw a big black dog. He was standing in the rain, getting soaked, and looking at me with sad eyes. I knew immediately what the trouble was. The dog was lost. He too had forgotten his address. I felt a great love for that innocent animal. I called to him, and he came running to me. I talked to him as if he was human. Fellow, we are in the same boat, I said. I'm a man, Shlemiel, and you are a dog, Shlemiel. Perhaps it's also your birthday, and there is a party for you too. And here you stand shivering and forsaken in the rain, while your loving master is searching for you everywhere. You are probably just as hungry as I am. I patted the dog on his wet head, and he wagged his tail. Whatever happens to me will happen to you, I said. I will keep you with me until we both find our homes. If you don't find your master, you will stay with me. Give me your paw, I said. The dog lifted his right paw. There was no question that he understood. The taxi drove by and splattered us both. A taxi. Suddenly it stopped, and I heard someone shouting, "Shlemiel, Shlemiel." I looked up and saw the taxi door open, and the head of a friend of mine appeared. "Shlemiel," he called, "what are you doing here? Why are you waiting? For whom are you waiting for?" "Where are you going?" I asked. "To your house, of course. I'm sorry I'm late, but I was detained. Anyhow, better late than never. But why aren't you at home? And whose dog is this?" "Only God could have sent you," I exclaimed. "What a night. I've forgotten my address. I've left my briefcase in a taxi. I've lost my umbrella, and I don't know where my robbers are." Shlemiel, my friend, said, "If there was ever an absent-minded professor, you are it." When I rang the bell of my apartment, my wife opened the door. "Shlemiel," she shrieked, "everybody's waiting for you. Where have you been? Where's your briefcase, your umbrella, your robbers? And who is that dog?" Our friends surrounded me. Where have you been? They cried. We were so worried. We thought surely something had happened to you. Who is this dog? My wife kept repeating. I don't know, I said finally. I found him in the street. Let's just call him How Wow for the time being. How wow, indeed, my wife scolded. You know that our cat hates dogs. And what about the parakeets? He will scare them to death. I must say that I am getting too much light. Well, anyhow, let me give them a sign. Maybe it will help. He's a quiet dog, I said. He will make friends with the cat. I'm sure he loves parakeets. I could not leave him shivering in the rain. He's a good soul, quiet. The moment I said this, the dog let out a blood-curdling howl. The cat ran into the room. When she saw the dog, she arched her back and spat at him, ready to scratch out his eyes. The parakeets in their cage began flapping their wings and screeching. Everybody started talking at once. There was pandemonium. Would you like to know how it all ended? Bow How still lives with us. He and his cat, or my cat, are great friends. The parakeets have learned to ride on his back as if he were a horse. As for my wife, she loves Bow Wow even more than I do. Whenever I take the dog out, she says, "Nah, don't forget your addresses, both of you." I never did find my briefcase, nor my umbrella, nor my rubbers. Like many philosophers before me, I have never given up trying to solve the riddle of which was first, the chicken or the egg. Instead, I have started writing a book called The Memoirs of Professor Schlemiel. If I don't forget the manuscript in a taxi or in a restaurant or on a bench in the park, you may read them one day, someday. In the meantime, here is a sample chapter. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you kindly. For years, I had trouble with too little light. Lately, I began to have trouble with too much light, so we will manage anyhow. I was promised a glass of water, and as always, it has been forgotten. No. Hopeless. Ladies and gentlemen, oh, this is, Rabbi, this is a miracle.
Don't spill.
No, don't take it away, Rabbi.
Right here.
If you take it away,
Right here.
right here, I will not find it. For me to find a glass of water, I have to see it. Okay. This story I call The Missing Line. Toward evening, the large hall in the Yiddish Writers' Club in Warsaw became almost empty. At a table in a corner, two unemployed proofreaders played chess. They seemed to play indoors simultaneously. Minna, the cat, had forgotten that she's a literary cat, written up in the newspapers, and went out in the yard to hunt for a mouse or perhaps a bird. I was sitting at a table with the most important member of the Yiddish Writers' Club, Joshua Gottlieb, the main columnist of the Yiddish newspaper Heint. He was the president of the Journalist Syndicate, a doctor of philosophy, a former student of such famous scholars as Hermann Cohn, Professor Bauch, Professor Messer, Kunner Fischer. Dr. Gottlieb was tall, broad-shouldered, with a straight red neck and a pot belly. The setting sun threw a purple shine on his huge, bald head. He smoked a long cigar and blew the smoke out through his nostrils. He would not have invited a beginner like myself to his table, but there was no one else available at this hour in the Yiddish Writers Club, and he liked to talk and tell stories. Our conversation turned to the supernatural, and Dr. Gottlieb was saying, "You young men are in a rush to explain everything according to your theories. For you, it is theory first and facts last. If the facts don't match the theories, it is of course the fault of the facts. But a man in my age knows that events have a logic of their own, and that above all, they are the product of causality. You mystics feel insulted if things happen in what we call a natural way. But to me, the greatest, the most wonderful miracle is what Spinoza called the order of things. When I lose my glasses and I find them in a drawer about which I was sure that I haven't seen it for years or opened it for years, I know that I put it there myself only 5 minutes ago. The eyeglasses would have stayed there forever, no matter how many incantations I would have made to receive them. As you know, I'm a great admirer of the philosopher Immanuel Kant. But to me, causality is more than a category of pure reason. It is the very essence of creation. You may even call it the thing in itself, das Ding an sich. Dr. Gottlieb, who made causality, I asked, just to say something. No one, and therein is its beauty. Let me tell you, young men, about 2 years ago, something happened to me which had all the earmarks of one of your miracles. I was absolutely convinced that no explanation was possible. Rationalist as I am, I said to myself, if this actually happened and it was not a dream, I will have to reappraise everything I've studied from first-class gymnasium to the universities of Bonn and Bern. But then came the explanation, and it was as convincing and as simple as the truth can only be. As a matter of fact, I thought I would write a story about it myself. However, I don't want to complete with our literati. I guess you know that I don't have too high an opinion of fiction. It may sound sacrilege to you, but I find more human fallacies, more psychology, and even more entertainment in the daily press than in all your literary magazines, which no one can understand anyhow. Does my cigar bother you? Not at all, Dr. Gottlieb. You certainly know, I don't need to tell you, that our typesetters in the Heint and in the Yiddish press generally make more errors, more mistakes than all the other typesetters in the whole world. Although they consider themselves ardent Yiddishists, they don't have the slightest respect for their language. I don't sleep nights because of these barbarians. Who said it, that 99% of all writers don't die from cancer or from consumption, but from misprints? Every week, I read 3 proofs of my Friday column, but when they correct one mistake, they immediately make another one, and sometimes 2, 3, 4. About 2 years ago, I happened to write an article about the same philosopher, Immanuel Kant. It was a jubilee of some sort. When it comes to philosophic terms, our typesetters are especially vicious. Besides, the one who does the layout has a tradition of losing at least one line from my column every week, and I always find it in another article, sometimes even in the news. That day, I quoted an expression of Immanuel Kant, which was a perfect target for misprints: the transcendental unity of the apperception, die transzendentale Einheit der Apperzeption. While I wrote it, I knew that our typesetters would make mincemeat out of it. But I could not avoid it. I read the proofs 3 times, as usual, and miraculously, the words came out correct the 3rd time. I even uttered a little prayer just in case. That Thursday night, I went to sleep as hopeful as a writer in Yiddish can afford to be. The papers are brought to me, the Yiddish papers are brought to me about Friday, 8 o'clock in the morning, and Friday is always the crisis of the week for me. In the beginning, everything seemed quite smooth, and I hoped against hope that this time I would be saved. But no, the line which began with the words, the transcendental unity of the apperception, had been lost. The whole article became senseless. Of course, I was angry, bitter. I cursed all the Yiddish typesetters with the vilest oaths. After some half an hour of utter resentment and extreme anti-Yiddishism, I began to look for the line in all the other articles of the Friday Hind, but this time it seemed to have been lost altogether. Even this was something of a disappointment to me. What burns me up more than anything else is the fact that people in the street, even my friends in the Writers' Club, compliment me, and they never seem to miss the missing line. I have promised myself 1,000,000 times not to read the Hind on Friday, but you know there is an element of masochism in each of us. In my imagination, I took revenge on the typesetters, the editors, the proofreaders, shooting them, hanging them, or even worse, making them memorize all my columns from the year 1910 until today. After a while, I decided that I have suffered enough, and I began to read The Moment, our competition newspaper. Especially to see what their columnist, Mr. Heifman, has written for that Friday. Of course, I knew beforehand that his piece could be nothing but bad. In all the 20 years we competed, I've never read anything good by this scribbler. I don't know how you feel about him, but to me, he is sheer abomination. That Friday, his concoction seemed worse than ever, as it does every Friday. So I gave up in the middle of the reading and began to read the news. I was reading a news item with the title, A Man, a Beast, the story of a janitor who came home at night from the tavern and raped his daughter. Suddenly, I saw the most impossible, the most unbelievable, the most preposterous thing that could ever happen. My missing line was right there. I knew that it could be nothing but a hallucination. However, hallucinations seldom last longer than a second or a split second. Here the words lingered before my eyes, the transcendental unity of the... I closed my eyes, sure that when I opened them again, the mirage would have vanished. But I opened them, and there it still was, the unthinkable, the ridiculous, the absurd. I must admit to you, young men, that while disbelieving in what you call the supernatural, I somehow toyed with the idea that one day a phenomenon might emerge in my life which would force me to lose faith in logic and in reality, but that a metal line would fly from the Hind composing room on Chlodner Street, number 8, to the Moment composing room on Nalevke Street 38. This I certainly did not expect. My son came into the room, and I must have looked as if I had seen a ghost, because he said to me, "Papa, what's the matter?" I don't know why, but I said to him, "Please, my son, go down and bring me a copy of the Moment." "But you are reading the Moment right now," my son said. And I answered that I must have another copy. The boy looked at me as if to say, "The old man is meshuggah altogether." Still, he went down and brought me another copy. Sure enough, my line was there on the same page in the same news item. The janitor came home from the tavern, saw his daughter in bed, and the transcendental unity of the apperception. Now, my dear people, I must lift up these missing pages. I cannot help. Oh no, there's more to that. Why did these pages run away? This is another act of the supernatural, but we'll deal with it later. I was so baffled and distressed that I began to laugh. To be completely on the safe side, thank you, I asked my boy to read the whole item out loud. He again gave me that look which meant my father is not all there. And he read the item to me. When he came to the transposed line, he smiled and asked, "Is this why you asked me to buy another copy of the Moment?" I didn't answer him, but I knew that no hallucination has ever been shared by two people, and certainly not for such a long time, unless if my boy had been a part of the hallucination. "Dr. Gottlieb," I said, hallucinations sometimes happen to more than one person." Yes. They are such collective hallucinations, he said. Anyhow, that Friday and Saturday, I could not sleep, and I could barely eat. I decided to go Sunday morning and speak to our manager of the printing department, my old friend, Dr. Gavser. If there is a man who cannot be fooled by abracadabra and hocus pocus, it is he. I wanted to see the expression on his face when he sees what I saw. On the way to the Hind, I decided it would have been a good thing if I could find the manuscript of my column, assuming that it wasn't thrown out. I asked if the copy of my article is still there, and lo and behold, they found it. And the words were there as I remembered them. I was eager to find a solution to the riddle, but I didn't want the solution to be based on some silly blunder, ludicrous misunderstanding, or a lapse of memory. With my manuscript in one hand and the Friday Moment in the other hand, I went to Mr. Gavza, and he too gave me a strange look, because I never go there on Sunday. I showed him my manuscript, and he said, please read this paragraph. Before I even finished my sentence, he said, I know. A line was missing in your column about Kant. I guess you went to publish a correction. Believe me, no one ever reads them. No, I don't want to publish any corrections, I said. What else brings you here on Sunday morning? Gavza asked. I showed him the Friday Moment with the item A Man, a Beast, and said, now read this. Gavza shrugged, began to read, and I never before have seen an expression like this on Gavza's quiet face. He gaped at the news item, at my manuscript, at me, again at the paper, again at me, and said, am I seeing things? This is your missing line. Yes, my friend, I said, my missing line has jumped from the Hind to the Moment, a dozen streets away, over all the buildings, all the rooftops, and settled down right into their printing shop, right into this item. Or possibly the Demas did it. If you can explain this, then really I cannot believe it, Gavza said. There must be some trick, some kind of practical joke here. Maybe someone glued in the line. Let me see it again. No trick and no glue, I said. This line fell out from my article and appeared in the Moment last Friday. I have another copy of the Moment with me. My God, how did this happen? Gavza asked. Again and again he compared my manuscript with the line in the Moment. Then I heard him say, if this can happen, anything can happen. Maybe the Demas really did steal you a line from the Hind and carried it to the Moment. This is the only possible explanation, I said. For a long while we both stood there looking at each other with a painful feeling of two adults who realize that the world has turned to chaos, all logic gone, and what is called reality is totally bankrupt. Then Gavza burst out laughing. No, it wasn't the demons, not even the angels. I know what happened, he exclaimed. If you know, say it quickly before I burst, I said. And here is how Mr. Gavza explained it to me. The Jewish National Fund often publishes an appeal, both in the Hind and in the Moment. Sometimes they make changes to adjust the appeal for the readers of the respective newspapers. Then they don't make a matrix, but the whole metal page is carried over by car from one newspaper to the other for adjustments. Oh, I expected really something. Well, it didn't work. At least my pages tried to fall down, which there's some demon here, there's no question about it. Yes, they don't make a matrix, but the whole metal page is carried over by car from one newspaper to the other for adjustment. By error, my line must have been put into the metal page of the appeal. It was carried over to the moment, and there someone noticed the mistake, took out the line from the appeal page, and it promptly got stuck into this news item, a man, a beast. The changes that such a thing should happen are not as small as one may think. Considering the fact, considering the sort of typewriters and proofreaders we have, Gavza said. They are the worst bunglers. No, let's not put the fault on the poor demons. No demon is as ignorant and as careless as our printers and the printers' devils. We had a great laugh, and in honor of that historical solution, we went and had coffee and cake. We spoke about the old times and the countless absurdities published in the Yiddish press, God bless it. Especially, he told me about the pure kind of corrections writers make in their stories or in their articles. For example, on page 22 is printed, she was his third wife. The correction is, he had a long white beard. On page 76 is printed, his oldest son died from typhoid fever. It should have been, there was no train from Warsaw to Vilna. And on page 85 is written, she cooked him blintzes every morning. The correction was, he never wanted to begin with. The most peculiar correction in the Hind was in an article where a writer wrote an article about the temperature of the sun, where he said that the corona of the sun has about 5,000 degrees. The surface has 6,000 degrees. The deeper it becomes, the temperature begins to become greater and greater until at the end, the temperature reaches to 1 billion degrees. And then the article ended with the words, and there the heat is unbearable. Dr. Gottlieb paused, trying to revive his extinguished cigar, sucking at it violently. Then he said, my young man, I tell you all this just to prove to you that one should not be in a rush to decide that modern nature has been liquidated, has lost its eternal laws, and that the goblins and sprites had taken over. As far as I'm concerned, the laws of nature are still valid, whether I like them or not. And when I want to convey a message to my old wife or to my not much younger girlfriend, I still use the telephone and don't rely on telepathy. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we decided that you should ask questions, whether you feel like it or not. and I should answer questions whether I know the answer or not. And if Mr. Amos will help me and stand behind me and point out in the dark your faces, I hope something will come out of it. But where is he? He ran away, of course.
I'm here.
You are here. I always imagine that the worst will happen, but he is here. Just lift up a hand and ask me. It doesn't have to be about this story. It can be about anything. Yeah.
When did you begin to write in English?
The lady wants to know when I began to write in English. The answer is I never began to write in English. I still write the first version of my story or of my article in Yiddish, and then I translate it into English. In the former years, others translated for me. Now I translate often myself, or I'm helped by someone, by my collaborator, but I'm still devoted to the Yiddish language, whether you consider it a language or not.
Do you feel that there's a loss between in the translation between Yiddish and English?
The gentleman asked me if there is a loss in translation. I will tell you, I have a rule that when I don't understand one question, I answer another question. So there's no trouble about it. I would say I would lose a lot if I wouldn't work on the translation myself, day in, day out, year in, year out. Because I know that all literature loses a lot in translation, and especially the kind of literature which is connected with folklore, or if there is some humor in it. Humorous stories cannot be really translated, and just as poetry cannot be really translated. I would be a very bad loser. But since I work on it, I see to it that I don't lose much, at least in the English translation. What they do to me in Chinese, I will never know.
In the center of the hall there. Could you explain how you develop these stories? From what sources do they come?
Say it again, please.
Could you explain how you develop these stories and what sources they come from?
I will tell you how I developed them. First, I must have a topic, a theme to write about. This is the first thing. And if I have a theme, I must have a great desire to write on this theme. Sometimes I have a topic, but the desire to write on it is not there. And then I have a third condition, which is very difficult. I must have the conviction or the illusion that I'm the only one who can write this story. If I have all the three conditions, I sit down and write a story, and I don't care what the message will be, good or bad or neutral. But let me tell you, the first two conditions are also difficult, to have a topic and to have an appetite for writing. But the third condition is terribly difficult, because I would have to be sure that there is not a single Yiddish writer who could write the same kind of story. How can I be sure? The truth is, I know all the Yiddish writers, or I knew them, and I know what they can do and what I can do. So with all these three conditions, if they exist, I write a story.
The gentleman in the back of the hall. Wait till the applause is over. As a naturalist, why are you always writing about demons?
The lady wants to know why I always write about demons. The first thing is, I don't write always about demons. This is the first answer. The second answer is, why shouldn't I write always about demons? Where is it written that a writer is not allowed to write always about demons? Or always about love or sex or suicide, when a real writer is allowed to write about anything. And if he's interested in demons, he will always find a reader who will also be interested. At least I hope so.
A gentleman on the aisle had wanted to ask a question. Gentleman on the aisle. Among today's Jewish American writers, whom do you most admire?
Where is it written that I have to admire? Yes, where is it written that I have to admire Jewish writers? I'm just as well allowed to admire Russian writers, French writers, Hebrew writers, or any kind of a writer. I cannot really tell you whom I admire most because I read mostly books written in the 19th century. Since I was born almost in the 19th century, 1904, or even later, I'm not sure when I was born. I am very much connected with this blessed century, and I read Tolstoy, Dostoevsky, Flaubert, Balzac. Of course, if I get a good book by a Yiddish writer, I will not stop reading it or ignore it because it's written by a Yiddish writer or by a Jewish writer. But to me, literature is not a question of who, in what religion the man is, or what even nation. I read everything which I consider good or which I hope it's going to be good. So because of this, I can really not answer you whom of the Jewish writers I admire. Of course, I should admire Saul Bellow and Malamud and maybe Philip Roth, but since I don't feel it's a duty, it should be a pleasure, I wait until it will be a pleasure.
The lady with the program up in the air. That's it. Since Jewish culture was always associated with Yiddish culture, how do you feel the decline in Yiddish will affect Jewish culture at large, so to speak?
The lady is supposed to have said that Jewish culture was always connected with Yiddish culture. I wish it would be so, but it isn't so. For 2,000 of years, we had Jewish culture, and we didn't have Yiddish culture. Hebrew is 3,000 or 4,000 years old, or 5,000 years old, and Yiddish is only some 800 years old. So your first statement that Jewish culture was always connected with Yiddish culture is not really completely so. But let me answer how I feel about the decline which you say of Yiddish culture. I will tell you, I know, and you know too, that in the last 2,000 years, hundreds or maybe thousands of languages have disappeared, completely disappeared. And also very many cultures have disappeared, and we are still here. Whether in Hebrew or in Yiddish is not important, or even in English. The important thing is that there is still a Jewish culture. Whether it's Yiddish or not is a question of really of conditions. This is my answer to you. Let me tell you, I don't believe that any culture which has created values, real values, can never disappear, can never decline to such a degree that it should be forgotten. I say that we Jews suffer from many sicknesses, but forgetfulness, amnesia is not one of them.
Lady in the third row.
I came to hear you in Yiddish. Could we hear something in Yiddish?
The lady said that she came to hear me in Yiddish. Can she hear something in Yiddish? All I can say is, I will say it in Yiddish. Mat mich du gedingen, zu reden in English, nicht Yiddish. The truth is that my English sounds very much like Yiddish to me and to many of my friends. But just the same, I cannot suddenly change the whole idea, and begin to speak to you in Yiddish. Lass mich hoffen, als ihr wird verstehen Englisch, als ihr versteht Englisch euch ein bisschen, und es wird haben Genuss von dem, was ich red in mein Englisch oder in mein Yiddish.
A gentleman about 8 or 9 rows back, right there. Where did you come?
The gentleman wants to know where I came from and what I was doing. What do you say what I was doing? Before I was born, do you say? No. No, I didn't hear well. I guess you asked what I was doing before I came here, and I can tell you exactly. My education was all religious. My father did not believe in any other really culture but Jewish religion. So this I did until I was about 11 or 12 or 13, and then I rebelled against my father. One day I said to him that I wanted to learn a little Polish because we lived in Poland. And my father said to me, just now, a day before the Messiah is going to come, you will begin to study Polish, he said. So I waited another 5 or 6 years. And then I developed such a Yiddish accent in my Polish that I never knew really whether I speak Polish or Yiddish or Hebrew. But this was until I came to this country, it was more or less the same. And in this country, I've been a scribbler for the last 50 years. First as a journalist, and now I write in Yiddish stories. And this is more or less what I was doing. But I'm sure that you asked something else, only I did not understand the question. Maybe Mr. Amos did not.
No, the question is, had been, where were you during the war? And I think you've answered that. You've been in this country for 50 years.
During the war. I'm sorry to say that during the war, I was in New York City. I was already too old to be taken to war. Or maybe I wasn't too old. Maybe they considered me a bad recruit, a schlemiel. I don't know the reason. So what I did is I tried to write. Again, now that I saw that Poland was being destroyed, I felt that there should be someone who should tell the story of Poland, the way of life, and I wrote a number of stories and novels. I think I gave you more or less a good answer, at least a true answer.
A gentleman in the back of the hall on the left. Could you describe any collaboration that you may have had with your brother?
The gentleman wants to know if I collaborated with my brother, who was a famous Yiddish writer. I would tell you, I was 11 years younger than my brother, and I wouldn't dare to collaborate with him just as a child of 8 years would not write something in collaboration with his father, especially if the father was a professor or something. I had too much respect for him to try this. My brother did read my stories, and for years he told me that they were bad. And I was very grateful to him because I knew that he was sincere, he had goodwill, and when he said that they were bad, I was sure that they were bad, and I tried to make them good. I lived to a day when he said they are becoming good.
In the balcony, first row. Was it especially painful for you to write about Holocaust survivors and enemies?
Say it again.
Was it especially painful for you to write about Holocaust survivors and enemies?
The gentle wants to know if it was painful to me to write about survivors and enemies. Of course, there was no pleasure to write about people who died in the hands of cruel brutes, and to write about the enemies, which my enemies are these brutes who killed and tortured all these people. It was a torture, but there was also a moment, or I would say a spark of pleasure in it, because I felt that these people have been destroyed, but it is my duty to at least to let know other Jews, other people, that there was such people and how they were destroyed and what happened to them. Even there is a moment of pleasure even in writing a tragedy. As a matter of fact, there are some people who love tragedies so much that they avoid comedies. They only go to see tragedies. So there must be something good in the tragedy too.
The lady on the right of the hall there, about 2/3 back. Where do you stand religiously today, and how do you feel about the loss of tradition among our people?
I would say that my religion consists of mostly I believe in God. I don't believe that the world, that the universe is a physical or a chemical accident, that there was some big bang, some explosion of a cosmic bomb, and this explosion has created the world. No, I believe that just as a watch had to be planned and made by a watchmaker, it couldn't have just arisen from little molecules or sand or glass joining pieces one another. But someone had to know that this is going to be a watch, it's going to be to show the time, and so is the universe. So in this respect, I'm religious. In other words, my religion is, I believe in a plan, in a divine plan. But if you call religion everything which is written in the Shulchan Aruch, everything which is written in the Hasidic books, to keep all this, to believe in it, that all this was given by God, and obliges me really to listen to it and to practice it, I would say in this way I'm not religious. So you can call my religion either a negative kind of religion, which means I don't believe in modern philosophy or in the accidents which modern scientists keep on heaping up one upon the other. But in this I don't believe. But neither do I believe that I have to pray 3 times a day or 5 times a day as the Muslims do. As a matter of fact, I pray more than 5 times a day. I once said that whenever I'm in trouble, I pray. And since I'm always in trouble, I pray more than anybody else.
In the back of the hall? The gentleman wants to know, what is your impression of the bar mitzvah that just took place in Krakow, and would you consider writing a story about it?
I guess the people heard what you said. I never write a story about a thing which I read in a newspaper. This is my rule. I'm supposed to teach creative writing to some students, and I always tell them, don't write stories about the things which you read in newspapers, which you see on television, which you hear on the radio. Write stories about your own experience. Since I wasn't in Krakow and I didn't witness this bar mitzvah, I'm not going to write a story about it. I think it's nice that someone has decided to make his son's bar mitzvah in this country where people were destroyed, our people, good people. But I don't have a special, there's nothing special which I can say about it, or certainly it's not material for some of my stories. Also, there's no love story in this. And I'm accustomed to write love stories. This man was most probably in love with God Almighty, but this love of God is not really a topic for my kind of writing. Although once in a while I do write about people who loved God, or at least have complaints to God. Because to have complaints with God or to God, you have to believe that He exists. And this is already some belief.
There are three gentlemen right in the middle there who want to ask a question. It's going to be very difficult, but one is getting up. See what you've all lost?
The gentleman says, I have been here for 50 years. How does it come that I mostly write about Poland, about my past? The answer is that many writers have done this. The first 10 or 15 or 20 years of a writer's life are the most important years as far as his work is concerned. I happen to live in Poland 30 years, and this was not only years of learning and of experience, but years of creative power, or at least of creative hope. So this, because of this, I always go back to Poland. Not always. I've written a number of stories about Jews in America, Yiddish-speaking Jews in America. I've even written a novel about America called Enemies, a Love Story. It isn't so that I go back always to Poland, but I'm mostly attracted to Poland and to my old experience. When you read the novels of Tolstoy and Dostoevsky and Balzac, you find the same thing. Writers are inclined to go back to their first years. Why it is so, there is a reason, but I'm not going now to discuss it.
The lady in the second row here.
I read somewhere that your writers group in Warsaw was very important to you. What influence did all these people have on you?
The lady has asked that she has read that the writers group in Warsaw was very important to Mr. Singer, and she wants to know how this group, how these writers influenced him.
Yeah, we had in Warsaw something which does not exist in this country at all, a writers' club, a Yiddish writers' club. This was not just a club, where here people come to a club either to eat, or sometimes they don't come at all, or they come seldom. I used to come to the writers' club every day for hours, and there we discussed literature, we ate. If we didn't have enough money to eat, we borrowed some money, or we got credit at the buffet. It was a second home to me. And because it was a second home, and I got acquainted there with many writers. My brother was also a member in the Writers Club, and many of my friends, and some of my girlfriends. I cannot forget this Writers Club. When I came to this country, I began to say to the writers here, why don't we have a club, a Writers Club here? And they answered, it cannot be in New York, because there in Warsaw you all live together almost in the same 2 or 3 streets. Here one writer lives in the Bronx, another one in Brooklyn, a third one in Chicago. We cannot have it. And for years I tried, I hoped against hope that I will persuade people to have a writers club. But it seems it's too late now. First of all, the writers there were young people. And the writers here, when I came, were already older people. Now they are more than old. They don't exist physically at all. So I would say, if I want to write about a writers club, I have to write about a writers club of the past.
Just 2 more questions. Sir?
When you write, your characters and plots often take twists and turns that you don't expect.
When you write, do your characters often take twists and turns that you didn't expect in the first place?
The answer is all the time. I make a plan for a story, and I say to myself, this will happen. And the moment I take my pen in the hand and begin to write, the characters get a life of their own, and they do what they want, not what I want to do.
Lady against the wall on the left side. In your view of Yiddishkeit, how do you approach Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur?
How I approach Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, I approach them that they are a part of our religion, of our tradition, of our very life. Our holidays were very important to us. We wouldn't have lived 2,000 years in the ghettos and in exile if we wouldn't have had holidays, days of joy, days of belief, days of feast. They are very important. I am not 100% sure that God sits on Yom Kippur on a fiery chair and writes down everything. This kind of conviction I don't have. I consider these more fables than facts. But that Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Pesach and Purim were important, were a most important part, an integral part of our lives. About this, I have no doubt. I think when Jews completely do away with their holidays, with their Sabbath, with their Yontif, they are losing a great part of their individuality, of their historic importance. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Ladies and gentlemen, coming up. Ladies and gentlemen, before you leave, I want you all to meet Mrs. Singer, Mrs. Alma Singer, if she would stand. I don't see her. Is she right here? There she is in the first row. And one other thing, and it's terribly important, do join us in the art gallery, adjoining for a glass of wine. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening. For more information on the 92nd Street Y, New York, and all of our programs, please visit us at 92ny.org.